The base was silent at night. Only the sound of machines hummed in the cold corridors. Soldiers walked past with heavy boots, rifles in their hands, but their eyes never looked toward the farthest cell. That cell was different. Everyone in the base called it the monster's cage. Inside that cage sat the prisoner. And they said she was not human. They said she was dangerous. They said she was a killer. But no one had seen her do anything. The guards spoke only in whispers, their voices shaking when her name came up. To them, she was not a woman. She was a thing, a beast from the stars. The prisoner had been there for days. Her hands were chained to the wall and her body was weak. Her skin, pale and shining faintly under the dim light, looked almost human, but not quite. Her eyes glowed faint silver and her hair, long and tangled, fell across her face. She had not eaten for so long that her lips were dry, her breathing shallow. Still, even in that state, there was something powerful about her presence. The soldiers laughed when they passed by her cell. "She deserves it," one said. "Better to starve the monster before she kills us all," another replied. None dared to step closer. None dared to look too long into her eyes. But one man could not stop thinking about her. He was not a soldier, not really. He was a worker in the base, assigned to clean, carry supplies, and follow orders. His name was forgotten by most of the guards, but his curiosity was strong. Every time he walked past that silent cell, he felt the weight of her eyes watching. She never spoke, never moved much. But he could feel her gaze, sharp like a blade, yet full of something else. Something that did not feel like hate. He had heard the stories. She was an alien captured after a battle. Her kind had arrived in ships, and the humans had called them invaders. A war had started, short and brutal, many died. The survivors were either killed or taken prisoner. She was the last one on this base. To the soldiers, she was proof of victory. To him, she was a question with no answer. One evening, when his shift ended, he lingered near the cell. The corridor was empty, and the guards were busy at the other end. He stepped closer, his heart beating faster. The cell smelled of rust and damp air. Through the bars, he saw her sitting on the ground, her head bowed, her hair covering her face. For a long moment, he only stared. Then, as if sensing him, she raised her head. Their eyes met. His breath caught in his chest. She was not what he expected. There was no anger in her gaze, no fire of a wild beast. Instead, there was pain, a deep, heavy sorrow that seemed older than the base itself. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but no words came out. He felt a chill down his spine. She looked more like a starving prisoner than a monster. Still, he stepped back quickly, afraid someone might see him. He told himself not to return, not to think about her. But that night, as he tried to sleep in his small quarters, her eyes haunted him. They were not the eyes of a killer. They were the eyes of someone broken, someone abandoned. Days passed. The base carried on with its routine. Soldiers trained. Officers planned. Machines kept running. But in that far cell, the woman grew weaker. The whispers spread that she had not eaten in over a week. Some said she would die soon. Others said it was better this way, that the world was safer without her alive. The worker could not take it anymore. He began to notice small details. The way her hands trembled when she tried to lift them. The way her breath slowed as if she were slipping into sleep and might not wake again. The more he looked, the more he doubted the stories told about her. Why keep her starving? If she was dangerous, why not kill her quickly? Why keep her alive only to suffer? Questions filled his mind, but no one in the base wanted to answer. They were too afraid, too blinded by hate. One night, when the corridor was empty, he stood before her cell again. His hand shook and his throat was dry. He wanted to speak, to ask her something, anything, but before he could, she lifted her face. Her voice was barely more than a whisper, rough from thirst and hunger. Food, it was the first word he had ever heard her say. Just one word, but it shook him like thunder. He froze. Fear battled with pity inside him. He knew the rules. No one was allowed to give her anything. Anyone caught helping her would be punished. But as he looked at her thin body, her hollow cheeks and her glowing eyes filled with silent pleading, he felt his resolve break. This was no monster. This was a prisoner, and maybe she was something more. First glimpse, the next morning the base was restless. Soldiers marched louder than usual and officers barked orders in sharp voices. Yet even with all the noise, the corridor that led to the farthest cell remained strangely quiet. No one liked to go near it. No one wanted to meet the prisoner's eyes, but he did. The worker carried a tray of scraps from the kitchen, food meant for the soldiers. The smell of warm bread and soup filled the air. but it only reminded him of the starving figure he had seen the night before. Her whisper still rang in his ears. Food. He told himself he would only pass by, only look. He did not plan to do anything foolish, but his steps slowed as he reached her cell. The corridor was empty. The bars cast long shadows across the floor. Inside, the alien woman sat with her knees pulled close to her chest, her head resting against the wall. For a long time, he only watched. The silence between them was heavy. He could hear his own heartbeat, fast and uneasy. Then, as if sensing him, she raised her head. The dim light struck her face. Her silver eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the shadows of the bars. Her lips were cracked, her skin pale, yet her gaze was steady. She did not look like a monster. She looked tired, broken, but alive. He swallowed hard. The food tray in his hand suddenly felt heavier. He remembered the guard's warnings. Don't meet her eyes. Don't trust her. She'll trick you. But when she looked at him, he did not see trickery. He saw hunger. Not just for food, but for something more. Hope, maybe, or mercy. He stepped closer, his boots echoing softly on the metal floor. She followed his movement with her eyes, calm but curious. She did not lunge. She did not growl. She simply stared, waiting. His hand trembled as he held the tray tighter. He wanted to push it through the bars, but fear rooted him in place. If someone walked in now, if someone saw, it would be over for him. Still, the thought of walking away felt worse. He lowered himself slowly, kneeling near the bars. She leaned forward too, her chains clinking faintly. For the first time, he noticed how thin her wrists were, the red marks where the cuffs had rubbed her skin raw. She lifted a hand, weak and shaking, but not threatening. Her fingers brushed the air between them, as though she was testing if he was real. He held his breath. Then, before his courage vanished, he broke a piece of bread from the tray and slid it across the floor toward her. The woman froze. Her glowing eyes flicked from him to the bread and back again. Suspicion filled her gaze for a heartbeat, but hunger was stronger. She reached for the bread, her hands trembling. The moment her fingers closed around it, something shifted in the room. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt alive. She ate quickly, but not like a beast. She chewed carefully, savoring every bite as if it was the first taste of food she had known in years. Crumbs clung to her lips, and she brushed them away slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. He expected anger or maybe violence. Instead, what he saw made his chest tighten. Tears. She blinked, and a single tear slipped down her cheek. He looked away, uneasy, guilt burning in his chest. Why did this feel wrong? Why did feeding her feel like breaking some sacred rule of the base? Maybe because it was. Maybe because they wanted her to starve, to disappear quietly, without anyone noticing the truth, but he had noticed, and now there was no going back. Why do they hate you? He whispered without thinking, her head tilted slightly. For a moment she did not answer. Then she spoke, her voice rough but steady. They fear what they do not understand. The words sent a chill down his spine. She spoke in clear English, her accent strange but soft. He had not expected her to sound human. He wanted to ask more, but footsteps echoed in the distance. Panic shot through him. Quickly he stood and lifted the tray. Hiding the missing bread under his hand, she noticed. Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. Then she leaned back against the wall, her eyes half closing as though she had never spoken at all. When the soldiers passed by, they barely glanced at him. To them, he was just another worker doing his job. The prisoner was silent, her head bowed once more. No one saw what had happened. No one knew, but he knew. And for the first time, he wondered if the real monster was not inside the cell, but outside of it. That night as he lay in his narrow bed, her words echoed in his mind. They fear what they do not understand. He closed his eyes, but her silver gaze burned in the dark. The first glimpse had changed everything. The forbidden act. The next day, the worker tried to focus on his duties. He scrubbed floors, carried supplies, and followed the orders barked at him. But no matter what he did, he could not push the image of her face from his mind. Those silver eyes, the single tear, the whispered words. They fear what they do not understand. It haunted him. Every time he passed the cell block, he felt the weight of her presence. Even when he did not look, he knew she was there, waiting, starving. The guilt pressed harder with each step. He had given her a small piece of bread, but it wasn't enough. One bite of food could not save her. He told himself to stop. He told himself to leave her alone. But the thought of her dying slowly in that cage gnawed at him until he could not stand it any longer. That night, when the base grew quiet, he acted. The kitchen was empty, lit only by a weak lamp. He moved carefully, his hands shaking as he gathered what scraps he could find. Half a loaf of bread, a piece of dried meat, a cup of water. It wasn't much, but to her it might mean everything. He wrapped the food in a cloth and slipped it under his jacket, his heart pounding as if the walls themselves were watching. Walking through the corridor felt like walking through fire. Every shadow looked like a soldier. Every sound of boots made his stomach twist. If he was caught, they would not show mercy. Helping the prisoner was not just against orders, it was betrayal. Yet he kept moving step by step until he reached the barred cell. She was awake this time. Her head lifted when she heard his approach and those glowing eyes locked onto him. She didn't speak, but her silence was louder than words. He knelt quickly, checking both ends of the corridor. Empty. He pulled the bundle from under his jacket and slid it through the bars. For a moment, she did not move. She stared at the cloth-wrapped food as though it was a trick, another test from her captors. But when he nodded, urging her, she reached out with trembling hands and pulled it close. The way she ate was careful, deliberate. She did not snatch or tear like an animal. She broke small pieces, chewing slowly, her eyes closing as though she was remembering what life felt like. He watched in silence, his chest tight. The water he had brought was gone within moments, and when she lowered the cup, her hands shook less. Her breathing sounded stronger. Then something unexpected happened. She looked at him, not with suspicion, not with anger, but with gratitude. Slowly she moved closer to the bars, close enough that he could see the faint glow of her skin under the light. "You risk much," she said softly. Her voice was clearer now, less broken though still rough from days of silence. He swallowed. "You would have died." Her lips curved faintly, almost like a smile, but there was sadness in it. Perhaps that was their plan. The words chilled him. He had thought she was simply a prisoner, but now he wondered if the soldiers wanted her to starve, not out of fear, but out of cruelty. Before he could respond, she reached out. Her chained hand slid through the bars, slow and gentle. He froze, every warning from the guards echoing in his head. Never let her touch you, but she did not attack. She placed her hand lightly on his, her touch warm, almost human. Then, to his shock, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to the back of his hand. It was not hunger. It was not trickery. It was a gesture of thanks. He pulled back slightly, his heart hammering. No one had ever told him a monster could show kindness. No one had said the alien woman could be gentle. She drew back, her eyes glimmering with something deeper than gratitude, something like trust. "Why?" he whispered. "Why trust me?" "Because you see me," she replied. "Not the chains. Not the fear, me." Her words cut deeper than any blade. He wanted to say something back, but footsteps echoed in the distance. His pulse spiked. Quickly, he gathered the empty cloth, shoved it under his jacket, and stood. She leaned back into the shadows, her face calm as if nothing had happened. By the time 2 guards walked past, yawning and complaining about their shift, he was already moving down the corridor, his expression blank, his heart on fire. Back in his quarters, he could still feel the warmth of her lips on his skin. It was a memory he could not shake, a secret too heavy to carry. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, knowing the truth had changed him forever. The act was forbidden. If they discovered it, he would pay the price. But deep inside, he knew he would do it again. Because for the first time since she had arrived, the prisoner was no longer just a prisoner. She was alive, and she had kissed him. The kiss sleep would not come to him that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt it again. The brief, gentle press of her lips against his hand. It had been so small, so fragile, yet it carried more weight than anything he had known in his life. A monster did not kiss, a monster did not think, and yet she had. The next day he walked through the base in a fog. Soldiers laughed, shouted, and argued as they always did. Officers barked orders. Engines roared in the hangars. Life inside the base carried on without pause, but for him, everything felt different. When he reached the corridor of her cell, his steps slowed. He told himself not to go closer, not to draw attention. But his eyes betrayed him. They slid to the bars, to the figure within. She was waiting, Her posture was straighter now, though the chain still pulled at her wrists. Her skin held a faint glow, her eyes brighter than the day before. The food had given her strength, but not enough. She was still fragile, still on the edge. When she saw him, she tilted her head slightly as though greeting him. A small motion, but it made his chest tighten. He forced his feet to move, walking past as though she was just another prisoner. But he felt her gaze follow him until he was gone. That evening, when the corridors grew quiet, he returned. She rose as he approached, her chains rattling softly. Her eyes glimmered in the dim light, steady and calm. "You came back," she said, her voice still rough but stronger. He hesitated at the bars. "I shouldn't have. Yet you did." He looked both ways down the corridor before lowering himself to the floor again. "If anyone sees me, they will call you traitor," she finished. "Yes, I know." Her calmness unsettled him. She spoke as though she had accepted her fate long ago, as though nothing could surprise her anymore. But then she stepped closer, her fingers curling around the cold metal of the bars. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He blinked. "Regret what?" "The food. The kindness. The risk." He shook his head slowly. "No, but I don't understand. Why did you do it? Why kiss me?" Her eyes softened. She leaned closer, her face only inches from the bars. "Because you reminded me I am not only a prisoner, not only a monster. You saw me." The words burned through him. He had expected anger, maybe a plea for freedom. But not this. Not gratitude. Not something so human. Her hand slipped through the bars again, reaching for him. He hesitated, his heart racing, then lifted his own hand. Their fingers touched, and for a moment, the cold steel cage felt less like a barrier and more like a bridge. Then, slowly, she leaned forward. He froze as her lips brushed his knuckles once more, soft and lingering. The air seemed to hold its breath. When she pulled back, he saw something different in her eyes. Not just gratitude, but warmth. A connection. He opened his mouth to speak, but footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. He jerked his hand away, panic surging through him. She, however, remained calm, slipping back into the shadows of her cell. The guards passed, yawning, complaining about their long shifts. They never even glanced inside. To them, she was already half dead, not worth noticing. When the noise faded, he exhaled shakily. "You shouldn't do that," he whispered. She tilted her head. "Does it frighten you?" "Yes," he admitted. Her lips curved, faint but real. "Good. Fear reminds you that you are alive." Her strange wisdom left him speechless. He stood, tucking his hands into his jacket to hide their trembling. "If anyone finds out, they will not," she said. "You are careful," but even as she said it, he knew she was wrong. Secrets had a way of breaking free, and this secret burned too brightly to stay hidden forever. That night, back in his quarters, he pressed his hand against his chest, feeling the ghost of her kiss. It had not been a trick. He knew it now. She could have attacked him, harmed him, cursed him. Instead, she had given him something he had not felt in years. Trust, and trust was dangerous, because the more he thought about her, the more he realized something terrible. He could not let her die. The truth revealed. The base was colder than usual that morning. A storm outside shook the walls and the air vents rattled like bones. Soldiers cursed the weather as they marched, but inside the far corridor, silence wrapped itself around the cell. He walked that way again, his hands carrying nothing this time. No food, no water, only questions. The woman was awake. She sat against the wall, her chains clinking softly when she shifted. Her eyes glowed faint silver in the dim light, watching him approach. "You are restless," she said. He blinked. "How do you know?" Her lips curved faintly. "Your steps. They are too quick, too loud. You are troubled." She was right. For days now, the weight in his chest had grown heavier. He could not stop thinking about her words, about the kiss, about the fact that she seemed more human than the soldiers guarding her. It did not fit with the stories he had been told. Finally, he crouched near the bars. "Why are you here? Why do they call you a monster?" Her eyes darkened, the silver glow dimming. For a long time she said nothing. Then in a low voice she answered, "Because they fear the truth." He frowned. "What truth?" She leaned forward, her chains scraping on the floor. "We came not as conquerors, but as seekers. Our world is dying. We traveled across the stars, searching for help, searching for a home. When we arrived, we offered peace. He felt his stomach twist. Peace? She nodded. But your leaders saw only threat. They struck first. Fire and metal rained from the skies. Many of my people died. The rest were hunted, captured, executed. Her voice cracked at the last word, and for a moment, the mask of calm on her face slipped. Pain flickered across her features. Real, raw pain. He shook his head. That's not what they told us. They said you attacked first, that you wanted to take the planet. Her eyes locked onto his, steady and sharp. Do I look like a conqueror to you? He stared at her thin frame, her shackled wrists, her hollow cheeks. She looked nothing like the monster from the stories. She looked like someone who had lost everything. The silence stretched between them, heavy with doubt. Finally, he whispered, If that's true, then why keep you alive? Her gaze shifted to the floor. A symbol, to remind their soldiers of victory, to tell their people that monsters exist beyond the stars, so they must always prepare for war. Fear is a powerful chain. The words sank into him like stones. He thought of the officers' speeches, the guards' laughter, the way no one ever questioned the orders. Fear. Yes. It was everywhere in the base, stitched into every face, every word. He pressed his hand against the cold bar. Then, they'll never let you go. Her voice dropped to a whisper. No, they will let me starve. The storm outside rumbled like thunder, shaking the lights above. For a long moment, he only listened to the storm and the sound of his own heartbeat. Then, without thinking, he asked, What would you do if you were free? Her eyes rose to his again. For the first time, he saw something new in them. Not sorrow, not fear, but fire. I would find the others who survived, she said. I would show your kind that not all humans are cruel. That not all must be enemies. The fire in her words unsettled him, but it also pulled him closer. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe there was more to the universe than war and chains. He swallowed hard. If I helped you. She leaned so close the bars nearly touched her forehead. Then you would be hunted, called traitor, branded the same as me. He felt the truth of it. His life would end the moment anyone discovered his secret. Yet when he looked at her, he realized he could not stay silent. For the first time, he said it aloud. You're not a monster. Something flickered in her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek, shining faintly in the dim light. She turned her face away quickly, but he had already seen. The storm outside roared louder, as if echoing the storm inside him. He rose slowly, his fists clenched. The truth was heavier than chains, and now he carried it with him. When he walked away from her cell, he knew nothing would ever be the same again. The escape plan. The days after the storm brought no peace. Whispers spread across the base like smoke. The prisoner, some said, was regaining her strength. Others swore they had seen her eyes burning brighter than before, glowing like silver fire in the dark. The guards grew uneasy. They doubled their patrols in the corridor. Officers ordered stricter rules. No one near the cell without clearance. No food, no water. If she grows weak, let her. If she resists, end her. He heard every word. Each one made his chest feel heavier. At night, he sat awake in his small bunk, staring at the ceiling. He could not ignore the truth anymore. They would not keep her alive for long. The orders were clear. Starve her, break her, erase her. And if he did nothing, she would vanish like the rest of her people. That thought gnawed at him until he could no longer stay still. The choice he feared was no longer a choice. If he wanted her to live, he had to act, he had to set her free. The first step was watching. He studied the guards, their patterns, their habits. Most were lazy, their fear of the prisoner making them careless. They never stayed near her cell for long. They spoke too loudly, played cards when they thought no one was looking, even left their posts early. But he also saw the danger. Cameras lined the hallways. Alarms rested on the cell door. Any wrong move would expose him for days. He pretended to carry out his usual duties while his eyes memorized everything. The times the corridor was empty, the sound of the cameras as they turned, the shift changes when the guards were half asleep. Each detail built the plan in his mind, though fear gnawed at him constantly. If he was caught, the punishment would be worse than death. One night, as he slid a scrap of food through the bars, he finally spoke. They won't keep you alive much longer. She lifted her head, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. I know, he swallowed hard. I want to help you, to get you out. Her gaze sharpened, studying him with quiet intensity. Why? The question caught him off guard. He searched for the answer but found only fragments. The memory of her kiss. The pain in her voice when she spoke of her people. The truth that had shattered every lie he had been told. Because you don't deserve this, he whispered at last. Because you are not what they say you are. For the first time her expression softened, not in sadness but in something warmer. Hope. Then you must hurry, she said. They plan to end me soon. I hear it in their voices when they pass. His pulse quickened. He had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed sent fear through him. How? By fire, she said simply. Your kind burns what it fears. The image twisted his stomach. He clenched his fist. Then we don't have much time. The following days were a blur of preparation. He smuggled small tools in his jacket, a bent nail, a piece of wire, scraps of metal. When the guards weren't watching, he passed them through the bars. She worked quietly, her chained hands deft despite their weakness. Slowly, the cuffs around her wrists loosened. He kept water hidden in crates, slipping it to her when he could. Each time her strength grew a little more. The glow in her eyes sharpened, and her voice carried more weight. But with each passing day, the danger grew as well. The guards began talking openly about her execution. Tomorrow, one said. Maybe the day after, another replied. Their voices were casual, but to him, every word was a countdown. The night before the order was set to arrive, he returned to her cell. His hands shook as he whispered, "Are you ready?" She lifted her wrists, the broken cuffs slipping loose. Yes. A shiver ran through him. She was still chained to the wall, but not for long. He pulled a stolen key card from his pocket, swiped it against the lock. The light flashed red. Denied. His heart sank. She touched the bars gently. Try again. Wait for the camera to turn. He held his breath, counting the seconds until the lens above shifted away. Then he swiped once more. This time the light flicked green. The lock clicked. The sound was small, but it felt louder than thunder. She stepped forward, the last of her chains dragging until they snapped free. For the first time she stood tall. Even weak from hunger, her presence filled the cell like fire. He staggered back. For a moment he feared what he had unleashed. But then she placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch steady. You will not be alone, she said. I will protect you. His throat tightened. We have to move quickly. The alarms, not yet, she interrupted, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. We will wait for the right moment. When the storm outside hides the storm inside. Lightning flashed through the small window, thunder rolling across the night. The escape had begun. The final choice, the storm outside, raged through the night. Thunder cracked like cannons and rain hammered against the steel walls of the base. Inside, alarms had not yet been raised, but tension hung heavy in the air, as if the walls themselves knew what was about to happen. The worker stood in the shadows of the corridor, his heart racing. Beside him, the alien woman moved with quiet grace, her broken chains dragging softly on the floor until she dropped them, leaving the sound of freedom behind. For the first time, she was unshackled. Even weakened, she carried herself with strength. Her glowing silver eyes swept across the corridor, alert and sharp. We must be quick, she whispered. Before they know, he nodded, though fear clawed at him. Every step felt like betrayal of the world he had known. But there was no turning back. They moved together through the dim hallways, timing their steps with the thunder to mask their sound. He led her through maintenance passages, narrow tunnels where soldiers rarely went. Twice they had to stop as patrols passed, the guards' voices echoing off the walls. Each time she pressed close to him, silent, waiting with the patience of someone who had endured worse prisons than this. Finally, they reached the outer gate. Heavy steel doors stood before them, locked and guarded by cameras. Beyond the gate lay freedom and certain death if they were caught. He pulled the stolen keycard from his pocket, his hands slick with sweat. The card was only meant for supply rooms, not an exit. Still, he had to try. The light flashed red. Denied. His chest tightened. It's not enough, he whispered. We can't open it. She placed her hand gently over his. Do not fear. I will not let them take you. Her calm unsettled him, but before he could ask what she meant, footsteps pounded behind them. Shouts filled the corridor. The guards had discovered the empty cell. The alarm screamed through the base. Red lights flashed, painting the walls in blood-colored glow. Run! He shouted. They sprinted down the corridor, the thunder of boots chasing after them. Plaster fire lit the air, sparks flying as shots struck the walls. He stumbled, nearly falling, but she pulled him forward with surprising strength. At the next junction, 3 soldiers appeared, rifles raised. He froze in terror. But she stepped in front of him. The silver glow in her eyes flared, brighter than before. She raised her chained hands and a wave of force burst from her, slamming into the soldiers. They flew back against the walls, their weapons clattering to the floor. The workers stared in shock. You could do this all along? Her gaze stayed on him, soft despite the fire in her eyes. I had no reason. Until you gave me one. The weight of her words sank into him. She could have broken free earlier. But she hadn't. She had waited for trust, for kindness. For someone to see her as more than a monster. They ran again. Turning corner after corner, the sirens wailing louder. Soldiers shouted in confusion, their voices mixing with the storm outside. At last they reached another gate, a smaller one, used for waste disposal. The smell was harsh, but it was their only chance. He swiped the card. This time the light flicked green. The door hissed open, cold rain poured in, washing over them. Freedom was only steps away, but behind them more soldiers surged into the corridor, weapons raised. Stop, one shouted. Don't move! The worker froze, his breath caught in his chest. If he stepped through, he would be branded a traitor forever. If he stayed, she would be executed. The choice tore at him. Then she turned to him, her hand touching his face with surprising gentleness. You have done enough. Go, live. He shook his head, tears burning his eyes. No, I can't leave you. You must, she said softly. If you stay, they will kill us both. If you live, you can tell them. You can tell the truth. The soldiers closed in, their rifles crackling with power. In that moment, he understood. The truth was heavier than chains, but it could not die with him. It had to be carried forward. He took her hand, squeezing it once. I won't forget you. Her silver eyes glowed brighter, and for the last time she leaned forward and kissed his forehead. Not all monsters are human, she whispered. And not all humans are monsters. Then she pushed him through the open gate out into the storm. The door slammed shut behind him. He stumbled into the rain, his chest heaving. The thunder drowned out the shouts inside, and when he turned back, the gate was locked tight. He could not see her, but he knew. She had stayed to protect him, to give him a chance to live, to carry her truth into a world that had never listened. And as the storm raged on, he realized his life was no longer his own. It belonged to her, to the truth, to the hope that someday humanity would see what he had seen. The monster was never the prisoner. The monster was the lie.